By listening to this interview, you'll discover why our democracy has ground to a complete halt, learn about a proven situation that's already working in countries like Ireland, and find out why a random group of truckers, childcare workers might be better at fixing the housing crisis than the entirety of federal parliament. I think you'll enjoy the episode. Is that Diary of a CEO vibes?
Yeah, kind of.
I'll work on it.
It's a bit smoother.
All right, Punter on Iain from newDemocracy. Now, I don't know what sentiments there are that you encounter around democracy. Such a big thing. We all seem to like it. How great is it that we can turf out a leader if we don't like them? But there's also a lot of negative sentiment online that I come across in the comments all the time. It's hopeless, it's broken, it's rigged, the system doesn't work, it doesn't matter who you vote for. Have you come across this sentiment given all the work you're doing?
Democracy is a word that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. We think in terms of there's a big definition and a little definition. The big definition: freedom of speech, freedom of association, separation, all these things are working super well. And if you take the little definition, which is how we make decisions, together, that's the bit that everyone agrees is broken. And I think it's pretty easy to separate the two things out. There's nothing wrong with our freedom of speech and freedom of association in Australia. Reaching a trusted public decision that doesn't have, I'm scared of the electoral incentives, I'm scared of, where my sources of money are, that's the tiny piece that we choose to work on.
You've already narrowed in on democracy's great. We want it to work, but you're saying, and I think everyone will agree with you, it just doesn't bloody seem to work. The housing crisis can't get fixed despite, I just spoke to a couple of economists recently who both agree with all the solutions, all the experts know, but for some reason, the solutions don't get passed. So are you really narrowing in on the solutions around how we make our democracy actually function instead of gridlock into inaction?
You've hit it. So what is it? Democracy is a much admired problem. You can pick up a newspaper and read 10 articles around what's wrong with it, and you finish the article going, okay, so what are you going to do about it? We have one answer to this, so what you're going to do about it. It's not a perfect answer. It's not a total answer, but we just take the view of, why don't we try it, see if it works, and if we can start to make trusted long-term decisions, then we'll do more of it. If we're wrong, if it goes horribly wrong, then, you just get to laugh at us and we'll go and sit in the corner for a while.
I like it. You got to try something. So before we get to this solution, which I'm very intrigued for, punters are desperate for solutions out there so that we know what we're looking for when our politicians are talking to us. But let's outline the problem then. The problem, as you're saying, is that democracy has ceased to function and be effective. Outline to me what this looks like and why you think democracy has ground to a halt in being able to solve the biggest problems we're facing.
Sure. All systems get more efficient over time. Accountants get better at finding taps, loopholes. Brickies get better at building houses faster. Over time, political parties have learned what it takes to win elections, and that's their primary goal. Their primary goal isn't to make you happy and solve your life problem. Their primary goal is for their side of politics to be in office. And once you look at everything through that lens and through a lens of incentives, everything kind of makes sense.
And it sounds like a key aspect of that is nobody's paying attention, which I can agree with. And part of the corner I sit in is we shouldn't bloody have to pay attention. That's why we have a politician, because I think the everyday Aussie punter goes, yeah, I put you in office to you look at the paperwork, talk to the experts, talk to the nerds and solve my problem. I've got a job over here to do. I shouldn't have to nitpick your every decision. And obviously democracy is great so that we can see the decisions and verify that they've made the right ones. But when nobody's paying attention, it sounds like the deception is way easier for politicians to pull just so they can win.
It's incentives. You do what makes sense to you, right in front of you. And the photo op makes more sense than taking a decision with some pain today.
So the goal for politicians is to win. Optics trump effective action because sometimes effective action can be immediately unpopular. The biggest example everyone always thinks of is Australia's decision on guns. The footage of John Howard making the difficult decision, everyone unpopular with it. But the long run, we're all happy that no one shoots up schools in Australia. That seems to be the problem we're outlining here. And now you're coming to your solution. Pitch to me your solution. You're saying we already have the solution because it's in our criminal justice system.
Yeah, it's a variant of the jury. I'm not going to torture the analogy, but pick an issue you care about. Let's do an easy one, the health system. It's unpopular about how do you pay for this. Imagine I pick 50 to 70 Australians at random, like complete lottery, just a simple match to the census profile. So I've got people by 10-year age bracket, 50-50 by gender. We ask people if they own or rent where they live. You only need to do really basic randomization just to get people all walks of life, blue collar, white collar, no collar, together. We pose them a question. So it might be, how can we pay for the health system we want? Now, if you think about election campaigns, we just came through one where the Prime Minister said, I'm going to spend $8 billion. And Peter Dutton, about 20 minutes later, went, yeah, I'll spend $8 billion too. Probably didn't know on what, but spending $8 billion sounded kind of awesome. And as voters were like, $8 billion, they must care about health. That's our opinion reaction. So I'm going to take a random group of people. I'm going to give them 50, 60 hours spread across 3 to 4 months. So you come along on a Saturday, having been selected as in part of this group, and you've got a simple task that you're going to answer this question as a group. So you've got to mix with people with really different views. In essence, what we've found is those groups are able to find agreement. So 80% is the floor, but commonly 95% of people can coalesce around one solution.
95%?
Easily done.
Of a random selection of Australians will agree.
Yeah, because there's no incentives. There's no incentives to disagree. Konrad, if we have, I don't care what side of politics, if they stand up and announce free Cadbury dairy milks for everyone, Caramello Koalas, what does the opposition do?
They want Freddo Frogs.
Yeah. You have the Freddo Frogs lobby say it's, the end of the world. Yeah. You've always got to wheel out an opposite position. A jury of people, we just live here. They don't have the barrier. They want to find solutions. They're not worried about re-elections. They don't have any donors. You start to see that the barriers to judgment are getting stripped away. And that has been found in a number of countries that they're actually taking really difficult decisions.
So talk to me about how it exactly would work in Australia. Does the government commission some kind of citizen jury around an issue? So if we pick a contentious issue that we just can't seem to solve, let's say, do we get rid of the capital gains tax discount? Immigration would be a flashpoint with people. How do you go from an issue to the government, to a jury, to a law?
Yep. So at the core of your question is we pre-agree authority. So we'll commonly get retained by a premier or a minister who says, here's a hard problem to answer. And as part of our taking it on, we pre-agree a level of authority. So generally, the report's public immediately. Government will respond substantively in 60 days. And that jury of people gets an hour with the commissioning minister or premier at the same time. What I'm trying to land is it's the best democratic opportunity you're going to get. Most access to politicians is either haggled through an electorate office or generously paid for. Why not give people this democratic opportunity? And if the rest of the community sees that room of 50 and goes, hey, someone with a job like me or a life like me in there, at least you feel connected to it.
This system sounds like it would be a net benefit for democracy and trust and help us unstick our broken system. Are there any countries that effectively use this to ungridlock something?
Yeah, I mean, the best example, again, is Ireland. The fact that you can have what was a right-aligned government wanted to reform abortion law. Now, whatever you may think of the issue, political degree of difficulty, 11 out of 10. Yet you've got the church as a major public voice. They had a right to life in the Constitution. Like, how hard do you want to make this thing?
And they have like a big Catholic, like way more religious than Australia sort of is, which would make the issue even more challenging.
Easy to move votes on that, isn't it? Easy to run a scare campaign. You know what the Irish government did? They picked 100 people at random, gave them 9 months and said, does this law need to change? And if so, how?
Wow. If so, how?
If so, how? And here's what it is. Think about how political campaigns normally go. You get a yes and a no, and they pick the worst argument of the other side and just repeat it endlessly. When you added a group of everyday people in the middle, they said, well, there's 6 scenarios where it should be legal, and there's 3 scenarios where we want it kept illegal. Gender selection, for race, cultural reasons and things like that. They wanted that still to remain illegal. What does that let a government do? It lets them say, we're going to have a referendum, and if it passes, we're going to broadly follow this 6 and 3 guideline. You've just removed the sort of stupid, endless arguments at the extremes. Now, for us, the success is that a government was able to discuss it at all. It's the ability to put it on the agenda. For what it's worth, that referendum passed 67-33, which is not how anyone expected that to go. Really interestingly, Konrad, 40% of Irish voters could name something that the Assembly had recommended. Why? Because you're more inclined to listen to someone with a day job than the endless politician on the telly, repeating the talking points, trying to get re-elected.
Yeah.
Just having the truckie from Cork, the childcare worker saying, I've learned some things and I think I need to change my mind. You never hear that in public policy. All we're hoping to do is be a provocation of the more people talk to their MP and say, let's do a citizens' assembly, can be on housing, can be on tax. We're actually willing to do the live fire test. This will be completely open, completely public. You can come along and watch it all and sit in the room, and it's either going to work or it's not. Either a group of Australians can find common ground on solutions where they thought of the costs and trade-offs, or we're wrong.
Yeah.
But it cost us about $2 billion per term of parliament to operate the federal parliament, and it would cost about $2 million to try this. It is 1/1000th of the cost to try to make parliament work better. You know, Konrad, that's why we got in touch and said, you're making people interested in democracy.
Yeah.
We've got a fun approach that is worth a try. And, more and more politicians are starting to listen. Unfortunately, not enough of them on the cabinet benches.
Not the ones holding power, which seems to be a difficult challenge, because it sounds like the politicians and their short-term incentives are always too often the problem. So let's get them out of the way as often as we can, and a citizen jury style decision-making process sounds like one way to make him take a backseat, because if there's one thing politicians don't want to do, it's give up power. That's why they're so obsessed with winning. So I'm pretty on board. I like the solution. I will take 3 of them, and I would love to see something like this play out. And it's not just because you guys generously donated to some tables for the Punters Politics Political Fundraising Gala. Question on that. Are you and anyone from your team going to be at this event?
At least 2 of us, and we're a little team, so that's most of the organisation. Unfortunately, the lovely philanthropist who actually writes the check, Konrad, I'm not giving away my money. Luke is overseas, or he would be down there. And I think we asked for a grand total of 4 seats.
So we're going to have to give away a couple if you're not going to use them.
Yeah, I'm up for that. And Konrad, the best part of this is no one ever talks about democracy. They talk about politics and get a bit football team of, my side's good, your side sucks. And that's politics. Talk about our democracy. So we were sort of hopefully pretty easy in terms of saying, we like what you're doing. You sent out an email saying I'm 12 grand behind. So we pretty unscientifically just went, well, let's take the first digit off that. We'll back you for that.
Once again, in this event, the Punters Politics crew, we're selling out to absolutely everyone. So I'm actually very happy to be openly and happily selling out to a very good sounding and proven solution to offer Australia's democracy. Iain, I can't wait to see you there. I hope to see you schmoozing as many politicians as you can and, offer them a few gifts. Maybe it'll help grease the wheels of democracy and get the politicians out of the way.
Konrad, if you can put them in the room, we can convert them to the idea. So there's the partnership.
Well, we've got 10 in the room. So between the 2 of you, you'll have to do a bit of working the room to get around to all of them.
Well, look at that. You are the best lobbyist in the country. And Konrad, you're trying to get a punters lobbyist in there, and it's fun. And hopefully we see a point where with the citizens jury, having 50 people in there on any given issue is, maybe a good step too.
Any way we can increase regular punters as quote unquote lobbyists into Parliament House will get me on board every day of the week. Iain, thanks so much for joining the punters on the Punters Politics Podcast.
Great to be here. Appreciate it, Konrad.
All right, Punter James.